Here on the dais, Mr. Ashok Mishra, the author of the book we are celebrating, What Constitutes Hinduism, and very august, very inquisitive gathering. When I got the book and a chance to go through it, I was first confronted with a question which I would like to share with all of you. Who is a Hindu? We are Hindus, as Professor Tete said, because our father is a Hindu. We are born in a family of Hindus, that's why we are Hindus. We go to temple or we don't. We perform a sacrifice or we don't. We perform yoga or we don't. We believe in certain facts like rebirth and Atma and Brahma and all that, or we don't. We remain a Hindu under all these circumstances. That means for the younger generation, mostly sitting here in front of me, they don't have to do anything to be a Hindu. They are just Hindus. Many times we don't know why we are Hindus. And it is this basic question which has been raised in this book. And the purpose of the publication is to acquaint the younger generation mostly, to acquaint the students who are more into anglicized kind of education system that we have today, and those who are in technical education who have never had an occasion to learn anything about Hinduism. If I remove the ism part, we are all confused. And while he was talking, I was reminded of an anecdote which a friend of mine told me. He had gone to Iraq about a decade back when Saddam Hussein was still alive. And he had perhaps lots of respect for Hindus or Hindu teachers. Many people went to Iraq at a phase of our recent past. And that there was a famous mosque he visited, and he wanted to go into the mosque. Somebody who was around, he asked him, "Are you a Hindu?" And that fellow said that, no, I'm a Muslim. But you live in India, don't you? Yes. So aren't you a Hindu? That same question which he raised, that in fact, that language doesn't have a sound of sa. For sa, they have ha. So that is how those living beyond Sindhu, they became Hindu. So this is the etymology which actually is, that's why we are called Hindus. We don't have this word anywhere in any of the text that has been referred here, and which we read in this context. So that is one strange thing. And we are now chanting a slogan, "Garv se kaho hum Hindu hain." Are we really? So it's on the lighter side of it. But I would like to come back to Ashok and his wonderful book that he has produced. He himself related to the beginning why the idea came into his head to write about Hinduism. Because the younger generation who is to be defined as Hindus doesn't know why he is a Hindu and how he has to be a Hindu. We perform things without knowing anything. The performer, as he said, the priest who comes, half the times he recites the mantras which a Sanskritist like Professor Thete would say is wrong, is not being rightly pronounced. If a mantra is not what we call ucharit na ho ठीक से, तो it can give wrong results. So we are into a system which is very chaotic. But coming to the book part, I think one of the biggest credit which we can give to the book and to the author is that he has surveyed a long history of thoughts, concepts, ideas, rituals, and other things which are associated with our Brahmanical and Puranic religion, which I would like to call it. And he has not only derived his material, drawn his material from the texts, but he has also gone out of way, looked into the vast majority of archaeological data, which is being unearthed almost every year, to know what is to be called Hindu religion. Religion is another word which I'm not very comfortable with, because dharma is a very wide, all-encompassing word, and that is what we follow. As a panelist, I have my dharma. As a listener, you have your dharma. You have to listen to me more carefully. So dharma can be as broad as this. And he has looked into the earliest evidence which we can relate, even if distantly, is the occurrence of a female figurine, very crudely made female figurine from a site now in Balochistan called Mehergarh. So we can trace the antiquity of mother goddess concept from Mehergarh, which has been dated to 6,500 odd years. So we can push back the antiquity of Hinduism or mother goddess, because we do have, we are going to have Durga Puja very shortly. So we can push back the antiquity of this kind of practice to 7th millennium BC. And that worship of mother goddess continued in the Indus Valley civilization, which we now prefer to call Sindhu Saraswati civilization, because we have thousands of sites located on the bank of the ancient Saraswati. So that's why scholars are trying to rename, redefine the civilization as Sindhu Saraswati civilization. And the mature part of this civilization was extensively into worship of mother goddess. We have mother goddess figurines in terracotta. We have got mother goddess figurines in stone, and very elaborately ornamented figures, and in large number. So that explains that they did have some kind of a ritualistic or religious connotation. And there is also an evolution in the figures, because at some point of time, the tradition continues, because we find mother goddess figurines sometimes we call ageless figurines. Ageless because they have been made very crudely, like they are also called star-shaped figurines, which it comes down to by early centuries of the Common Era. They are there to be used in some ritual. On 22nd, we will have a puja which we called Jivit Putrika. Jivit Putrika Vrat is for health of progeny. And there we have a Lakshmi Kund in Varanasi, where these figurines are immersed in that kund on Jeevit Putrika Day. So that immersion, then in 1st century, 2nd century CE, there is a pond which was excavated at the site of Shringaverpur, very close to Prayagraj. And in that kund, large number of such small mother goddess figurines were recovered. So what I'm saying, that there is a tradition of worshipping mother goddess right from the Mehergarh period to almost up to the present day. So we have one of the very important factors which we talk about Hinduism is it's like a ocean with flowing current. It is not static. If I elaborate this point, we started from Indus Valley, that is Indus Saraswati civilization, if we go back to 7th millennium BC. If we look at the Vedic literature, the Rig Veda is the earliest human composition anywhere on earth. Nothing has been written before Rig Veda. And the composers of Rig Veda, they were seers of very high intellectual caliber. They call themselves Arya. Now, whether Arya is a linguistic connotation or it's a race, it is not a race. The racial element comes to be associated with the Aryans at some point of time in our history, which is really very, very controversial. But Arya does mean someone who is very enlightened, sophisticated, Shresht. I think Professor Thete will agree with me that that is what the word literally means. So they know that they are very evolved. And they composed beautiful poetry, the hymns, the suktas, which are there in more than 1,000 richas, which we call them. 1,045 or something of that sort, that's the number, I believe. It is mostly eulogy to nature, to forces of nature. There is also some philosophical inputs. They are inquisitive about creation, what is and how the world was created. Some of the most beautiful poems that have been found in Rig Veda are some kind of an ode to Usha, the goddess of morning, how it comes up and how it illuminates the entire world, including our hearts, our minds, our intellect. So it is surprising, it's amazing in whatever date we give, the date which is broadly accepted, which Ashok Mishra also has taken to be the date between 1500 BC to 1000 BC. Max Muller, the German scholar who actually has the credit of translating the Vedas, taking the Indian knowledge system to the West, he gave this date initially. But then he was confronted by many scholars from many corners. And then he says, whether the Vedas were created in 1500 BC, in 3000 BC, or 4000 BC, nobody can say it for definite. So that's to his own admission. So we don't know. Because if we look at the content, we find that there are so many things which look more Neolithic in their nature, while the others are so evolved, philosophically very highly uh, evolved concepts. So, but then time comes when language of Rig Veda becomes very difficult for ordinary mortals to understand. And the Sanskrit scholars themselves call it Arsh. Arsh means one which is old, obsolete. So even by the later Vedic period, the scholars have started having difficulty in understanding what is being talked about. Because one word, which he himself has pointed out, if Udat and Anudat ways because Vedas are actually meant to be sung, meant to be recited orally, not to be, as he can find out many difficulties having problems with diacritical marks in a writing. So that kind of a thing goes on. So my father-in-law was a Sanskrit scholar, and I am a student of ancient history. So I asked him once that I want to learn this part of the Veda. And you know what he said? Bahu ji, Banaras mein aajkal koi nahi hai jo aapko wo padha dega. So this he told me something like 30 years back. Now the situation might be even worse. So that is the difficulty. What we want to understand from those writings, it's not so easy for us to get into it. So that is one thing. Still, broadly, we understand what it is through translations. With translations, I don't know how many of you have tried to read a translated book. So many times it is so difficult what the author what originally said and what the translator is saying. So if this can happen today, think of someone who is not part of your tradition, who doesn't understand. So many things we know because we have been told, we have seen it throughout our lives from childhood. But someone from outside, he comes, looks at it, he will have a different eye with which he will view things. So those translations, how accurate they are, now we have to depend almost entirely on them. A section has been dealt in this book by Ashok on how the manuscripts must have reached Europe and the damages done to those manuscripts. So that is another problem. But be that as it may, after the Rig Vedic times, what we call in history the early Vedic age, we enter the later Vedic age, which was more productive. The three Vedas, which were composed later on, Atharva Veda was not included perhaps as Veda for quite some time because we come across the word three. And I'm a Tripathi, so only three Vedas. Then somehow, as the Aryans moved deeper into the Ganga plain, Ganga Yamuna plain and beyond, they perhaps came in contact with the indigenous traditions which were thriving in different parts of the country, and they gradually started absorbing them. Adapting. One of the strongest points of Hinduism is the capability to adapt, and absorb. We have been able to absorb so many traditions. So many foreigners came in India, the Kushanas, the Shakas, the Hunas, the Greeks, and they all got assimilated. They lost their identity, became Hindus. The great Menander the Heliodorus, who calls himself Mahavaishnava. So we absorbed many indigenous traditions which were maybe non-Aryan in nature. I had been telling my students that why women were denied being taught the Vedas. Initially, we have composers like Ghosha, Apala, Gargi, and there are so many names who compose the Vedic riches. But at some point of time, we are told that for women and Shudras, Vedas are denied. Why? My own hypothesis, right or wrong, I don't know, is that when the Aryans started moving from the Saraswati Valley to Ganga Yamuna plain, they came across local people who had their own way of life, their own socio-religious practices, and they started settling with them, including marriages. Now, and polygamy was very... So if you bring in one wife to sit with me and recite the mantras and tell the other not to, what will happen? There will be, in China, the symbol for war is sign of two women. So I think some such thing was taking place, and at one point, if they could not pronounce the Sanskrit words rightly, they were denied altogether that you better don't. अभी हम लोग गांठ बांध के पूजा में बैठ जाते हैं, हस्बैंड का वो होता है धोती या दुपट्टा और हमारा पल्लू. So we don't have to do anything, वो हमारा सब काम साथ साथ हो जाता है without saying in a word. So that could be one reason. But what I think I should come back, and I'm taking too long, but what I felt that during the later Vedic period, when they started composing the other three Vedas, they, to facilitate, many commentaries were written, samhitas. Then on that, the Brahmanas had to be composed to explain, elaborate upon what was written in brief in the Vedas. Then some people started philosophizing, and Aranyakas came in. Aranyakas are to be studied in Aranyas, in the forests. So go and sit in the quiet solace of the forest, that atmosphere, and learn it through the Guru. So that went on. One other aspect which was very important was the growing complexity of the rituals. He has made special effort to talk about the rituals, their significance, their changing dimension through the ages. And when the rituals started becoming complex, it became a prerogative of a small class of Brahmanas, the Purohitas, who could perform it for you on your behalf. And you are expected to give something in lieu. The other thing which happened with these rituals was a yajna which would go on for 12 long years. And there would be animal sacrifice, there would be ahuti of tons of grains, ghee, gur, til, the havish. This became rather difficult for perhaps common man to withstand. And at this very time, one more interesting thing happened in our history was that people started sort of, if I may use a strong word, rebelling against this. They started reacting at least. And one of the reactions was emergence of Buddhism, Jainism. Okay. So that started giving different ideas to people. And then we have an intellectual class of Upanishads. And Upanishads are great contribution of India, which the world has acknowledged. Here I was relating a quote by Schopenhauer, the great Jewish scholar from Germany. He read the Persian translation of Upanishad, which was done in Latin. And the statement, which I cannot stop the temptation of sharing it with you, and then I would try to be brief. Schopenhauer says, "From ever since deep, original, and sublime thoughts arise, and the whole pervaded by high and holy and earnest spirits, Indian air surrounds us, and original thoughts of kindred spirits." And oh, how thoroughly is the mind here washed clean of all the early engrafted Jewish superstitions and of all philosophy that cringes before those superstitions. In the whole world, there is no study except that of the originals so beneficial and so elevating as that of the Upanishads. It has been a solace of my life. It will be the solace of my death. That is a famous line which many times we come across being quoted. So this is something which shows that how wonderful the philosophy of Upanishads was, and how it spread to the world and how it was admired. A few important things of which are associated with our Hinduism, as Professor Thete pointed to some, and Ashok pointed out about this ritual of marriage. A few things which Varna and Ashram he pointed to. Then we have a concept of Purusharthas, and we have a concept of Pancha Mahayagya and Tri Rina. These are a few unique things which are almost exclusive to our tradition. Varna Ashram I will not talk about much because it has already been touched upon. But the theory of Purusharthas, Dharma, Arth, Kam, and Moksha. In no religion in the world, I think Kam and Arth have been given equal importance for a balanced life view of a person. All that we need to do is to follow it with Dharma. Dharma is the primary this thing. If I'm a grihast, I have to be a grihast who will follow his duties properly, dharmic. And what is the duty of a grihast? To perform Panch Mahayagya every day. What is Panch Mahayagya? His effort to do something for the devas, for the rishis or gurus, for the parents or the elders, for common man, Nri Yagya, Nara. So common man, and eventually Bhut Mahayagya. So these are Panch Mahayagyas which every householder is to perform every day. Khana bana ke hum khud hi kha lein, that is denied. So this has to be done. And rinas, the concept of debt. As an individual, I am born with 3 debts which I have to fulfill this obligation towards Dev Rin, Pitri Rin, and Dev or Pitri, and yes. So, since gods gave us our life, we have to do something to repay that. To our teachers, the huge tradition which we are today talking about is something which is the doing of that great tradition. We have to be doing it, repaying it. And then we have to repay our debt to our elders, to our parents. One thing I would like to be very personal, that as a child, we all create problems for our children, as our mothers, parents. And we always say, हमारे लिए क्या किया आपने? But when we have our own children, then we realize for the first time what they did for us. They kept nights after nights without sleeping, giving their own share of things to their children, remaining hungry. Even the worst parent would feed the child first before he or she eats. So that kind of a thing is something we realize only when we become parents. I am a student, I would keep telling, वो मिलते नहीं हैं उनके पास जाओ तो. When my student comes at a time when I am trying to meet a deadline and I say, आज नहीं कल आ जाना, then that realization comes how they feel and how I should not have behaved. So that is something, that is the debt. Yes. So these are some of the things which, as Hindus, we have to realize, and we have to realize this, thinking that our younger generation has to be acquainted with all this. And this great job has been done by Mr. Ashok Mishra. So I would like to thank him. And I am sorry that I exceeded my limits in talking to you. Perhaps I was so excited about the book and what all has gone into it that I could not stop myself. So thank you very much for giving me this patient hearing.
Professor